It is Monday, May the 15th, which is about, I don't know, a month, maybe 5 or 6 weeks since I completed my embellishment of each of the 53 chapters in my two books, follow-up and thoughts, which was a fun thing for me to do. I enjoyed that very much. But it's been a few weeks since that, and I wanted to per the request, Cassie texted me and said we needed to do a little Granny Lartham session on our 50th wedding anniversary trip. So that's the goal here, is to talk about that little trip that Mom and I took over the previous week or 8 days. One other thing, yesterday was Mother's Day, and I know Mom enjoyed it very much. She was able to go and see some of her grandkids speak in church. Odin spoke in church for the first time. Conrad gave a scripture and a prayer in his primary setting with a joint primary session there with the junior and senior primaries, and then Penelope also did the same at the end of the primary session. So we stayed for the whole 2-hour session, not just sacrament meeting, but we went into primary and enjoyed that very much. Listened to the kids sing and practice and that sort of thing. So and Odin did a great job in his talk. He talked about mothers and so forth. One thing that he mentioned that I thought was kind of hilarious. He mentioned not only his mom and what a great influence she was, but also his grandmothers. He mentioned that his grandmother Salsa had she taught him how to ride a four-wheeler. However, he didn't say this part, but it didn't work out too well. Yeah, he learned how to drive a four-wheeler, but he crashed 2 or 3 of them. And in fact, I think one of them was not repairable. So he needs a little work on that four-wheel driving situation. But he also mentioned that Grandma Larson taught him how to be a computer hacker. He didn't use the word hacker. He had it in his talk, but he left that out. But taught him how to cut and paste and get pictures and do all those things that he now knows how to do very well. And Grandma Larson taught him how to do that. So, I didn't know Grandma Larson was a criminal learning how to hack the computers. But she really didn't do that, but it made it kind of funny anyway. At any rate, later in the day, of course, Tyler and Alicia and their kids came over and brought a little treat for Grandma, and just as Tyler and Alicia were leaving, Garth and Brittany and their family came over, and they had a little interchange there as they were coming and going and so forth. And we visited with Garth and Brittany and their family for a bit. And then last night, of course, Mac and Julie, we were able to FaceTime with them. And so it was a great day. Mom enjoyed it very much, and she deserves all of that. I do my normal purchase of flowers, pots, for Mother's Day. That's what I normally do, and so we did that again. But she has to go pick those out. I can't do that for her. She knows what she wants and likes. So she and Diane, I think, went over and picked out 3 or 4 pots for planting or displaying in the summertime. And of course, our house is always among the most beautiful in the neighborhood because of her ability and the roses and the pots and all of the gardens that she does outside. Anyway, that was a great day. But I wanted to talk a little bit about our trip. First of all, the only way we were able to take this trip was because of the generosity of you guys. That surprise party you threw for us was still shocking to me, and it was unexpected, totally, and much appreciated by both Mom and myself. It was a great thing to have everybody there, and the events were fun, and the food was great, and of course, being around family is always the best. That's always that is my favorite thing to do. So anytime we can get together, we look forward to those kinds of occasions. But your financial generosity allowed us to go on this trip. If it wasn't for that, we'd have probably motored over to Shoshone for an ice cream cone, maybe even a large this time instead of a small. And those of you who've been to the Shoshone ice cream shop, you know what I'm talking about there. But so we were able to go to this trip. It was great fun. We left on Monday, May the 1st, about 8:30 in the morning. The reason I mentioned May 1st is 50 years ago. Of course, our wedding occurred on Friday, and Friday morning, sealed in the temple, and then we went to the Bluebird Cafe there in Logan. That's where we were sealed, the Logan Temple, and had a wedding breakfast. For a lot of folks were there, and we enjoyed that. And then we took off for Cary for our reception that night. Friday night, we had a reception in Cary, and that was eventful. And Vic and I got to Cary fine, and we were changing clothes, but somehow Mom and Dad got a little lost, I guess, and so I had to leave Vic's house and hop in the car and go see if I could find them. They got off on the wrong roads, and there weren't any cell phones then to call and so forth, so I had to go check and see where they finally got there, but it was a little hiccup there. At any rate, had the reception and the photographs in Cary. Had a great reception, and went to Sun Valley for that evening, and then we went to Soda Springs on Saturday for a little open house in my neck of the woods. Of course, Saturday night, we stayed in our little trailer, which I had rented and so forth. We enjoyed that. And of course, we went to church on Sunday, and we left on Monday, the 30th of April, to go for our honeymoon, which we ended up, and I didn't tell Vic before we were going, but we ended up in Lake Tahoe, which is just above Reno there, for about 3 days. And we went to San Francisco for my part of the honeymoon, where I could see the Giants play, and it was a beautiful city, and go to the Golden Gate Bridge and Alcatraz and the Fisherman's Wharf and Lombard Street, the windiest street in the world. And so anyway, it was fun. But we left one day earlier than we did on this trip 50 years later. And so the events I'm portraying were just a day later than they were on the original 50-year anniversary, or original anniversary. The original honeymoon is what I meant to say. Hey, it's about an 8-hour trip to Reno. We probably had been faster to go to Vegas, but I wanted to recreate the same route we went on our original honeymoon, which we did. And we were going to go up to Lake Tahoe, and that's where we stayed in our honeymoon for those 3 days in Lake Tahoe. It's beautiful, beautiful lake, but it was wind about 50 miles an hour and snow. It was snowing up there, 4, 5, 6 inches of snow. So we'd experienced enough snow here over the winter, and so we decided to forego that opportunity to go to Lake Tahoe. So we didn't make that one, but we stayed in the Ramada Inn, room 814. I thought Ramada Inn was going to be great, but it was in a little tougher part of town. It was a good hotel and so forth, but it wasn't in the finest part of town you've ever seen in Reno. But it's about an 8-hour trip from here to Reno. We stopped in to eat along the way and so forth. In fact, wanted to recreate the same situation that went on in the original honeymoon. Our first official purchase as a married couple was in Wells, Nevada on our honeymoon. We didn't have a camera, so we stopped in and bought a camera in Wells, Nevada on the original honeymoon. We didn't do that this time, but we went through Wells and relived those memories as we went along. We up at Lake Tahoe, that's where the Bonanza television show was shot, and so we went to the sets of the Bonanza television show. We went to a concert with Petula Clark, which she's terrible. Vic likes her, but I never was too thrilled about Petula Clark. But whatever Vic wanted, Vic got in on the honeymoon, so that was good. It was at the South Lake Tahoe Casino there. We went to that. We ate at Denny's after we got to Reno. Denny's is kind of like, we always go to Denny's when we're going to a BYU football game down in Tremonton, but they've closed that one down in Tremonton, but it kind of reminded us of going to the BYU football games. Mom always gets the moons over my hammy when we go to Denny's. I don't know why, but she kind of likes that, so she got it again, and so we enjoyed that. We left Reno about 9 o'clock in the morning. By the way, we picked up an hour with Pacific time. About 9 o'clock, headed for Solvang, and it was about a 7 or 8 hour drive to Solvang. Went through beautiful country, vegetables, fruits, wine country, grapes, all that sort of thing. So the scenery was beautiful and different than it is here in Idaho, of course. When we got to Solvang, as we approached, we ate at a real fancy restaurant. I'd never seen it before, never heard of it, but we were hungry, and I saw this one as we were driving along, pulled in on a whim, and it looked like a pretty nice place, and it turned out to be beautiful. It was really very, very good. It was a seafood place, and that's one of my favorite things. So what we did, we had a combination plate and shared it. It was had a lot of stuff on it. It had clams and shrimp and scallops, and had a big lobster, not just one of those little teeny lobsters. It had a full-size big lobster in this seafood combination plate. Scallops and halibut, had halibut. I mentioned shrimp, and so they had some hush puppies, some fries, had some clam chowder. So we kind of shared that, and it was very, very good. It was dang good. I don't know because I was so dang hungry, but it was really, really good. But it was expensive, very expensive. It just shocks me every time I buy anything in any store, including restaurants, how expensive things are these days. I'm back in the 50s and 60s and 70s when it wasn't quite that expensive. But at any rate, the restaurant was very good and got our Solvang experience off to a real good start. Went for a walk after we checked into the Worldmark unit, and your Worldmark is just normal. It's the same units wherever you go, and that's one of the beauties about this Worldmark thing is you know what you're going to get into there. Went for a walk and around town. We were really close to the town in the Worldmark units there. We could walk everywhere. We never drove anywhere in the week we went to Solvang, except when we went to Santa Barbara, Simi Valley, to the Reagan Library. All right, at any rate, we get up the next morning, which is Wednesday morning. We got to Solvang on Tuesday. Wednesday morning, and walked down to the main street, down to all those curio shops, knickknacks, and oh my goodness, Vic loves those things. I walked into the first 2 or 3, and it's okay, but in my estimation, they needed to call in an airstrike and start over in most of those places. There wasn't anything there that I wanted to look at or whatever. So while Vic was, I told her, you take it all the time you want, I'm fine. I went out on the sidewalk and sat and watched the people walk by. It's kind of fun to watch people go by. By the way, I heard very little English on that while I was out there on the sidewalk. There was visitors from all over the world. I mean, I'm sure I heard some German, I know the Japanese, and Oriental languages, Spanish, all over the place. There was a lot of different languages being spoken, and I didn't recognize any of them. But so, at any rate, by the way, one observation while I was looking at all these people, I think the Lord loves common, ordinary people because He made so many of them. And I can attest to that because I'm the leader of the pack. I'm ordinary, common, not very attractive people. But He made a lot of those folks as we experienced there. All right, we had dinner. That's a combination between lunch and dinner, middle of the afternoon. We went to a restaurant, I think it was called the Bit of Denmark or something like that. Bit of Denmark or something like that. And it was a Danish food. And it was very, very good. I think Vic had pork, some pork with red cabbage and mashed potatoes and gravy. Gravy was over all of it, and she really liked it. I had a combination plate where I had pork and meatballs and some sausage of some sort, Danish sausage, and French fries, and there was hush puppies, I think. No, that was at the fish store. That's where the hush puppies were, with the clam chowder. But it was very good. I could eat it then. I could go to Denmark and eat very comfortably because the food was very tasty, very tasty. Thursday, we spent the whole day downtown. The morning of going to those knick-knack shops, we went. There's a whole bunch of bakeries down there. Denmark is famous for their pastries, and we went into, I think it was 2 of them, and bought different pastries for breakfast, and it was very good, very good. But so that's how we had breakfast. Kind of went into a couple of those bakeries, so that's why we didn't eat till middle or late afternoon in this Danish restaurant. Thursday we get up. Thursday morning, leave early because we had to travel to Santa Barbara. Simi Valley is actually where the Reagan Library is located, and it was a couple hours away. It opened at 10 o'clock. I think we got there around 10:15, and spent the entire day in the Reagan Library. It was physically taxing because we were walking and not a whole lot of places to sit there, so we were walking to the various venues and so forth. There was videos about his life, from his early childhood and adolescent period, his school years, his college days, and his family. How he got into acting. He hosted the General Electric Theater for years. He got into the movies. He never made any blockbuster movies, but he was a handsome guy, and how he met Nancy Reagan, who was also an actress. And by the way, she gave up her acting career to support him in his political career. So those kinds of things. His becoming embroiled in the Screen Actors Guild. He became the president of the Screen Actors Guild, which, by the way, is one of the more liberal organizations in the country. Was then, not quite so severe as it is now, but he was the president of the Screen Actors Guild. So he was a liberal Democrat at one point. And he also, made several movies. They talked about some of those. He was an athlete in high school and college and so forth. They talked about Dixon, Illinois, is where he grew up. He was a lifeguard and those things. So it was very, very interesting. He became in politics because of his work in the Screen Actors Guild, and eventually saw the light, at least in my humble opinion, and became a very conservative Republican, to the point where he was given the honor to nominate Barry Goldwater as the Republican nominee for president in 1964. And that speech is the speech that more than any other propelled him into the political spotlight. It was such a powerful speech, and he was so good at that. He was termed the great communicator, and he certainly earned that reputation. He was a wordsmith. He could craft words and thoughts into very understandable ideas that the people could understand. In fact, he was so effective at it, when he became president of the United States, the Democratic Party controlled the Congress, and he went over the heads of the Democratic Congress and went to the American people and convinced them enough to get tax cuts that have never happened before, less regulations than there'd ever been before, and left to their own devices, the Congress would have never passed those. But the American people were so motivated and moved by President Reagan's ability to speak to them directly. It's what caused those things to happen. And we don't want to pass up, he became governor of the state of California. It was in a mess, just like it is today. In fact, not as bad as it is today, but I think they had like a $23 billion debt. But Reagan employed capitalistic ideals, cutting regulations, cutting taxes, and spurred the economy and got them out of debt. Got them virtually out of debt in those years he was governor of the state of California. He, of course, became president of the United States, and he almost took the nomination away from then President Gerald Ford in 1976, but lost out to Ford in 76 at the Republican convention. And of course, in 1980, he was elected president overwhelmingly again in 84, and served for those 8 years. During those years, and talked about all of these things. His work with Gorbachev and the reduction of our nuclear weapons, and the agreements that he came to, and he is credited with defeating communism, at least temporarily, because we did not give in to them. We negotiated with them, and Gorbachev recognized that his economy could not keep up with the economy of the United States, and the Soviet Union, as it was called at that time, split into various portions. There, Georgia and all of the various breakoffs of the former Soviet Union, which, by the way, Putin today is trying to reestablish the old Soviet Union that was broken up during the Reagan administration back into consolidated Russia. That's his goal. This war in Ukraine that's his goal, is to reestablish the old Soviet Union and expand it beyond that. So, at any rate, Reagan, of course, was his life was attempted to be taken. Hinckley shot him. Very interesting, the accounts there. One little note there, he was not shot directly by a bullet. It was a ricochet. Several shots were fired, and of course the back door of the limousine where he was going to get in was open. It always is when a president approaches, in case something like this happens. And when the first shots rang out, the Secret Service around Reagan shoved him into the back seat of the limousine. But as they did so, another shot rang out and hit the front of the limousine and ricocheted down the side of the limousine and went between the open door and the car itself as Reagan was being shoved into the back seat. And that bullet hit him in the left side and came within about half an inch or an inch away from his heart that would have killed him. It was very close that he died in that attempt, but it wasn't a direct hit. It was a ricochet. At any rate, very interesting. In the Reagan Library, there is the actual presidential plane, Air Force One, is in the library, and you have a chance to go through that Air Force One and see the communications center and the offices and the executive suites where the president worked and learned, and he used that extensively as he traveled all over the world in that plane. And you get a chance to, have your picture taken at the door of the Air Force One. You can wave like the president does as he gets on Air Force One. But it's right in the library there, and it was very interesting. Now, that was a pretty small plane compared to what they have today, but it was very impressive to see that. Anyway, lots and lots of interesting stuff. Now, the greatest president we've ever had is George Washington. The second greatest president, at least in my humble opinion, is Abraham Lincoln. And I would rank Reagan as number 3 as my, number 3 on the hit parade in terms of my favorite presidents in the history of this country. There were others that are very, very influential and so forth, but I got to know Reagan growing up. He had a vignette every day on the radio. He would come and it'd be like a minute or two, and he would bring up different subjects, and in a very clear, cogent way, he expressed his views about those subjects. And I was so impressed with him growing up. I remember listening to those every day, and became so enamored with him as not a youth, but a young man, and it continues today. Of course, Ronald Reagan contracted or suffered with Alzheimer's later on in life, and that's what caused him to suffer as a result of that. And Nancy suffered and his family, but his gravesite is right there at the library along with Nancy, and so we enjoyed that day very much. They close at 5 o'clock, and so we had to leave. But we took in as much as we could, and it was very, very fun for me. I know Vicki enjoyed it as well. Yeah, very, very, very fun. We ate at the library. The food at the library was okay, but it wasn't as good as what we'd experienced up to that point. But it was fun to go and visit that library. We got home, and we were on this Nutrisystem diet. We took a whole bunch of Nutrisystem with us so we wouldn't have to eat out the whole time. So when we got home, we had Nutrisystem when we got home from the library back to our apartment in Solvang. On Friday, so Thursday is when we went to the library. Friday, we walked to a Danish museum right in Solvang there. Very, very interesting, the history of Denmark and how the Danes came to the Central California valleys, and some people that were the progenitors there, all of Danish descent, and there was artifacts there and some films, and it was interesting. And like I say, we walked again to the museum. When we finished the museum, Vic went into the rest of the shop she wasn't able to see 2 days before, and so she hit them all. She got to see all the shops there were in Solvang, and of course the Danish architecture is evident there, and so that we ate at a very nice Italian restaurant later on that evening. Very, very good. Excellent food. Boy, the food there was really good. Went back to the World Mark, and by the way, it was only 2, 3, 4 blocks away, so we were able to walk everywhere in Solvang, and we always needed to walk a little bit. I always try to walk a little to keep that ability going there as long as we can. Saturday, which was the last day we spent in Solvang, we went to the beach. Vic's a lover of the beach, and so we had to get to a beach. It wasn't right. Solvang's not on the coast. So, but we went to Santa Barbara again, just about an hour and a half away, I guess, to the beach, maybe a little less. The first beach we went to was crowded, lots and lots of people. They'd had a huge storm there the previous few weeks, and it had eroded the beaches, and even several palm trees around the beach had fallen into the ocean, and you could see where it had eroded, and the tides were higher than usual, the waves were stronger than usual, and so lots and lots of folks, but not a huge beach either. There were surfing going on there and so forth. We took some videos of all of those kinds of things. So, but when there weren't any shells, Mom's a shell person. So we went to another beach, found another one down the road, 15 minutes away. And so went to that, and it was virtually deserted. There was only very, very few people there. And we walked down the beach, and to Vicky's delight, she found shells. Oh my goodness. She was in hog heaven here when she was finding shells, and they were found mostly amongst the rocks. It wasn't out on the sandy beach, but they were in the rocks up a little further on the beach. So we were walking around in rocks, and as you may or may not know, my balance is not very good even on level surfaces, so walking around in those rocks was a little challenging for me to find these shells, but she found some beautiful shells. In fact, here we'll give you a little demonstration here. Here's one of them. This is that's a partial shell, but look at how beautiful that is. Yeah. And we were picking up shells for a few hours there. Here's another. She's got them in 2 or 3 of these. There's the shells, and oh man. Yeah. At any rate, she loves those shells. In fact, she's got a room, as you all know, she calls it her shell cove. And so she was enjoying that very much. So we picked up a bunch of shells along there. The waves were powerful, as they always are in the ocean. That's an impressive. The ocean is always very, very impressive. At any rate, let's see, one other thing. Oh, yeah. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, these knick-knack shops. She went through them all, and she found something that she thought she wanted to have as a memento of our trip, and so she purchased this. It's the something about Copenhagen, the statuary of Copenhagen or something, right? But you can see this little girl has a hammer in her hand there. Since Great-Grandpa Larson was a blacksmith, we're calling that the blacksmith hammer there, even though she has it in her hand there. At any rate, it's a beautiful piece of statuary, and she thought that was what she wanted, so we purchased that, and that's kind of a memento for Mom of our trip to Solvang. Okay, Sunday morning is time to come back home. On our first honeymoon 50 years ago, we had to stay in San Francisco an extra day or two so I could watch the Giants win a game. They lost a couple of games while we were there, and I couldn't leave without them winning, so we stayed one more day, and they ended up winning that game. But it was a night game. It got done around 10 o'clock or so, and so we headed out from the game to come home to Soda Springs. So we drove all night to get home back to Soda Springs. Didn't do that here. We broke it up. We headed out on Sunday morning back to Reno, back to the same hotel, the Ramada Inn there. And let's see, we got to eat at In-N-Out Burgers. That's one of our favorite places to eat. Of course, it started in Southern California. They're all over the place now, but we got to eat there, and got back to Reno, a pretty good time. By the way, the weather was cold and windy when we set out on Monday and Tuesday, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it got better and better, and it was never terribly warm. It was in the 60s maybe for the most part, but it was very pleasant, and the weather wasn't bad at all. Of course, later on in the week, when we first left though, it was windy and rainy and even snowy, as we mentioned up in Tahoe. All right, we get to Reno, and had some Nutrisystem up in our room there, and left Monday morning to come back to Twin Falls. And as fun as it is to go away for days, and this was a great trip, it's always great to come home. So it's always good to come home and get in your own bed and reconnect with family and the dogs and the familiar surroundings. So it was good to come home as well. At any rate, last thing I wanted to mention is the 50 years that Mom and I have enjoyed together have been wonderful. It's been the blessing of my life. I've mentioned that many times, to have her as my partner for those 50 years. I'm hopeful it can extend for many, many more years. You were blessed to have the mom that you had and still have. She is the best. And so we enjoyed this trip so much, and it was because of you that we were able to take it. Thanks very much. Have a great day.